BRIDGE is an acronym for Books Recycled to Instruct, Disciple, Guide, and Educate. We firmly believe that reading is critical for Christians to grow in their faith, and so we strive to make Bibles and gospel-based Christian books available at very affordable prices. Our purpose is to share the glorious good news of Jesus Christ through written and spoken word. We do this by providing resources and educational opportunities for people to grow in their knowledge of biblical truth so that they are equipped to share that truth with others.
You can visit our website at bridgebookstexas.org, where you can find our Reformed podcast, Bridge Radio, where we bring on Christian authors, apologists, and scholars such as Dr. James White, Dr. John Frame, Joel Beakey, Jeff Durbin, John Sampson, and Tim Trumpert. You can find Bridge Radio on iTunes, Android, Windows, and Google Play, or stream via our website. Thank you, and enjoy the podcast. Speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, Ephesians 5:19. Welcome back to another episode of Bridge Radio, coming at you from the great state of Texas, proclaiming the gospel fearlessly and faithfully. I am your host, Julio Amad Rodriguez. You call me July, and across from me, I don't have A.W. Varilla, but I got one of my best friends. He's a worship leader at Grace Bible Church here in Laredo, Texas, in our community. And welcome and thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, glad to be here, man.
All right, if you're a new listener, please subscribe to us. We're on iTunes, Android, Windows, Google Play, and right now we are currently in the development of an app just for our guests and listeners. And please go check out our past podcasts. Recently, we finished up our series on the doctrines of grace. It was a 6-part series, and we had scholars and professors come on the program, such as John Frame, Dr. James White, John Sampson, Jeff Durbin, and Joel Beakey. Last week, not last week, but the week prior to that, we had Rosaria Butterfield come and talk about her book, The Gospel Comes with a House Key. We had Harry Reeder, and then last week as well, we had a really good podcast on pornography and the addiction. So please go check that out. Don't stop listening to this one, but go check those out after, and we have much, much more. If you want to support our ministry, you can visit us by going to www.bridgebookstexas.org. Click on our About/Giving tab, and this is how you could support this great Christian Reformed bookstore and coffee shop. So anyway, you excited, Isa, for the guests that we have on?
I am. I'm totally excited.
Yeah, me too. So in 2010 at Mars Hill Church in Seattle, Washington, a worship leader gathered a team of his musicians to create a Christian band. Their sound is a conglomeration of music genres, including orchestra, indie pop, math rock, and hip hop. The band recorded their first EP, Sin, in 2011. In 2014, their EP, Live in Color, was released. Finally, in November of 2014, they released their debut LP, Becoming Who We Are, and since then, they have released 2 more. They've been tremendous and a big influence on us, since Isai and me are musicians, but their last 2 were Beyond Control, and the recent one is The Beauty Between, which we'll talk about today. And it's just an absolute honor and privilege to have on the lead singer and songwriter of Kings Kaleidoscope, Chad Gardner. Welcome to Bridge Radio, man. Thank you for coming on.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
So how's your day been going today?
Dude, all I've done is made breakfast and vacuumed my basement studio. That's about it.
That's about it. Sounds like a busy day. Hey, so we've seen, me and Isai have gone up to Austin twice to see you. So we've spoken to you before. You just probably don't know who we are. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I know just one thing, to be completely honest, like me and Isai we've agreed on this before, but we've seen like John Mayer. I've seen John Mayer live twice. I've seen Kings of Leon twice, and we all seen Young the Giant. Those are some of our favorite bands, but I know by far our favorite was going to go see you guys in Austin. So
we're putting you up there, man. We're putting you up there.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's the best thing I'll hear all week. That's really, man, thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So our first question we wanted to ask, and so this is kind of a little fun question to get into it, but if you could replace your entire band with your favorite pastor and or theologians, who would they be and what instruments would they play?
Dude, that is such a nerdy question.
Yeah, it is. I would write that one up, man.
You guys, here's the thing. I am not a theological nerd, or I have no idea, honestly.
Okay.
Like, they would probably just be my friends that I'm actually close to that are my pastors.
Okay.
I don't really like nerd out like that on that stuff. People surprises people because
Right.
I have like this reformed background.
Right.
So I honestly though, I'm serious. They would just be my friends that are my pastors. It'd probably be like pastor of my church right now, and I have a really close friend named Alex Early. He wrote a book. He's written 2 books.
Okay.
And he's his doctorate. He's like my nerd friend. He'd be in the band. I mean, I'm sorry to bail on the question, but I honestly would like. I have no idea.
So what
over my head.
What instruments would they play though?
Well, if I had to do this,
Yeah. What do you think they'd be good
they all
at?
probably would suck. Okay. You know, guys who just read books for a living, they're probably so bad at music that we'd probably be like an electronic band, and they would all just play like samplers or something like that. and
Push
just
buttons.
cue stuff.
Yeah.
And I would do all the music ahead of time, and they would just cue samples. That's probably what ended up happening.
Yeah, that's true. It's such a nerdy question. One second.
John Piper would be the lead singer, though. I wouldn't actually sing, and he would just be shirtless, and he'd be wild. He'd be a wild front man. He'd be like a screamo, something like that.
You'd be a screamo singer. All right then.
So Chad, just wanted to start off too. Can you share your testimony about how God drew you to saving faith?
Yeah, I just grew up in the church. That's really it. My parents are faithful believers, and I can't remember not talking about God in my household, not having my parents not, pray with me for things that were difficult for me from a young age. The thing that I was sort of the tangible time in my life where I started to really feel like I came to know God personally was when I was probably, 4 or 5 years old, and I've always had anxiety disorder, and I had a lot of asthma as a little kid, so I'd have panic attacks, and then I wouldn't be able to breathe, and I just feel like I was going to die. And so my mom spent a lot of time praying with me, reading the scripture, sometimes, while taking me to the hospital, stuff like that. And I really did feel like that's kind of how I learned who Jesus was and came to know him, was through kind of just having to go through that as, a really, really young kid. I think my parents told me they remember my first panic attack. I was 2 or 3 years old. So that was just this thing where as a young kid, even though I grew up, in a great household with great parents, there was always this fear that I was going to die. And I didn't know where it was coming from or why that was happening to me. And it was a physical thing, like you stop breathing.
Right.
And that was really where I kind of needed to, at a really young age, find out who God was and think about death in a very real way. Well, yeah, I was raised in the church and raised in the faith, and that's just literally it. By the time I was 16, or let's see, eight. When I was 18, I ended up interning for that church that I kind of grew up attending, because I was really, really interested in becoming a worship pastor someday. And so I led worship for 2 years there, and then moved on to Mars Hill Church and kind of started Kings Kaleidoscope down the line there. So, sorry.
That's awesome.
Not that noise there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the usual story with that is kids usually start showing a disinterest because it's more of a tradition after a while, but you grew up with a sort of a more personal relationship with God in that sense. You were leaning on him. And
Definitely.
Yeah, this is something that me and you share, and we'll probably talk about it further down the line in the podcast, but is dealing with anxiety. I know the first time I ever listened to the song Prayer, and once I knew sort of what was behind the meaning of that, the song to me meant a lot more because growing up as a child, I struggled tremendously with anxiety. I had like separation anxiety from my mom. I thought people were gonna die, and it was already to the point where I was like 6, 7 years old, and they were gonna put me on Xanax. By the grace of God, I never went there. It was terrible. So I relate, and then just going back to what Isai was saying was like, there's this dependency, especially me as well, growing up in a Christian household. There was always that dependency on God and seeking after Him or having my parents guide me towards that direction. So yeah, and at what age did you start to have interest in music? Is this something that you grew up with, or it was just at a specific age?
Yeah, I mean, that was also just kind of from being young. Like I was in my church had a kids choir that I joined. I actually got kicked out of it, which I didn't remember till like a week ago. My mom told me that they kicked me out because I was too like rowdy and rambunctious. But my parents did a lot of music at church, and I would just kind of hang out with them. Sometimes on stage or whatever, like trying to play a little pretend guitar with my dad. And my whole family is really musical. Like my mom sang in jazz choir in college, and everybody played instruments. My uncle has a chamber choir in Seattle that's very accomplished, and it's just kind of in my family. So I kind of grew up all around it. And my first instrument was drums.
Okay.
Well, no, that's not true. Everybody in my family had to take 5 years of piano lessons. So I did that and hated it the whole time. And as soon as I was in 5th grade, it was like, finally, I got to pick my own instrument. I played drums in, middle school band and whatnot, and playing drum kit. And I really, really, really started to kind of fall in love with making and writing music in like 6th and 7th grade when I started to DJ.
All right.
So I started, I was just really into hip hop all growing up. And I just started collecting vinyl records and sampling and making beats. And, it really wasn't until like high school that I learned how to play guitar and really started to sing and stuff like that. Really, it was like drummer, beat maker for a couple of years there. But that's kind of how I started really making music and learning about music.
Right. And so what was the moment whenever you said like, hey, I want to pull this band together and make this, ginormous band with like 15 people, and it's going to be called Kings Kaleidoscope. What was like the influence behind that?
Well, a lot of the influence behind that is from the way I grew up making music sampling. So like a record collection that I would have, and I would be sampling. I could sample anything I wanted to, a choir, string section, horns, anything,
Right.
And so even before Kings Kaleidoscope, when I was working at a different church, I was compiling like a lot of people to play a lot of different types of instruments. And I was arranging, when I was 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, I was like still doing like kind of what Kings did at first. Like I was arranging hymns with tons of different instruments. And then I got to Mars Hill Church in Seattle when I was 21, something like that, 20. Like 20, right before I turned 21, and ended up working there for 4 years. But during that time, a couple of years into it, we had to actually like give the new group of folks at that church that I had been kind of wrangling a name, because we had to put out the Sin record. Okay. Or the church had to put it out. So we were kind of like, okay, we actually need a name. And King's Kaleidoscope was the most reasonable name that we had come up with. Or we didn't even come up with it. A friend of ours came up with it. Okay. And it was the only one that like wasn't absolutely ridiculous. So,
do you remember any of those other names?
Do you remember any of the other names?
Yeah. The Buddy System.
What? Nah. Seriously?
Yeah. I hit for Bobby. Freaking Vortex. Like there's just tons. They're just all funny.
These all sound like punk bands.
Yeah, totally. Riot Salsa, Shekinah Ruckus. Like we were just
Shekinah Ruckus.
Yeah, we just like, it wasn't a serious thing. We're just kind of like, well, whatever. Yeah. And so then through that church, we put out Sin and A$AP Zeros, like some hymns we played all the time at church, and a Christmas one. But that's kind of how the band was formed. Is like the church. We just wanted to release the music that we were playing on Sundays for the church to have during the week. And It ended up just kind of getting out to a lot more people than that. And then, and then when I left, we had this big dilemma of like, okay, I'm going to go make an actual record, which was our first record, Becoming Who We Are.
Mm-hmm.
Do I keep the name Kings Kaleidoscope, or do we let it kind of die out with the church and pick a new name? And we ended up keeping the name, which is funny. My manager's down here with me right now. We're just talking about like we have this constant dilemma that it's a blessing and a curse, because those EPs initially were for such a specific purpose. They were just so obviously like for just corporate singing, and now that we don't have really any of that, we're just a band now,
right?
And so it's hard. Like they kind of feel to us like two different things, but they have a lot of similarities. So we're kind of we're always looking back, going, oh, should we have like started a new band or like a new name or something? Because these new records, they feel like who we actually are, and most of our new fans, they don't really know what's going on with that stuff from when I was working at the church. But then the people that knew us from that time, the story makes great sense to them.
Yeah.
But it's just harder for new fans to understand. Like, you hear Sticks and Stones, and then you hear like In Christ Alone, and it's like, what? This is like a completely different thing.
Correct. Yeah. I can see that.
Yep.
Yeah, and so now, this is a question that's definitely related to this, but like, would you see King's Kaleidoscope now as as a ministry, or like, what's the mission of King's Kaleidoscope? Is as I would phrase it.
Sure. Man, it's a big question. I mean, to be honest with you, King's Kaleidoscope is sort of an extension of me getting through life by just making music. That sounds kind of weird, but when I was growing up dealing with just all of my anxiety and emotions and all that stuff, I would just retreat to my room and make beats and kind of pour my guts into them. And that's how I got through life, in a sense. And it actually still feels like that's the powerful thing that Kings does. And that's what then God kind of takes and blesses the church with. But it's not necessarily like I look at making a record and go, all right, what do we need to communicate? What does like the church need to hear? Right. I don't think of the audience in that way. I think of very personally, like what do I need to say? Like what do I need to make right now to get me through whatever I'm going through, or to reflect what I'm feeling? Like it very much is like, it's just art. And but I think because it's so centered around my faith, and music has always been the way that I kind of grapple with God, that extends to so many other people in the body of Christ. Like, people, it just feels like there's not necessarily a mission behind it, but that's what it does. Like King's Kaleidoscope gives emotion to, I think, a lot of people's faith that they don't know how to have the emotion for, or they don't know how to express it. And I think that the reason that it feels so just real and tangible is because I'm really kind of doing it in a sense for myself, and then we publish it. we blast it out to the world. Yeah,
and I mean, kind of going off of that too, so why do you think it's or why would you say maybe it's essential for a Christian to encounter God in worship through music and through lyrics, and maybe kind of through poetry, as you put it?
Well, I mean, it's funny. My son just turned 3 yesterday, and we were at his party, and there's like all these, all of our Seattle musician friends are there and everything, all his families. And Brian Eichelberger, my good friend who has this band called the Sing Team, and he was also at Mars Hill, and he mixes everything for us. And he was freaking out. He's just saying, we're catching up, and he's like, man, music has just been blowing my mind recently. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it's just crazy. It's science, and it's empathy, and it's literally just like sound waves that come out of nowhere and
Yeah.
they create emotion, and it's so it's literally like it's just a freaking glorious mystery.
Yeah.
As
I
much
get
as
it.
nature, where you kind of go, it's not that like, why is this essential? It's just kind of like, how does this even exist?
Yeah.
Like what even
Uh-huh.
is music, and what an incredible thing that
Yeah.
exists that we can kind of like have and feel and
Mm-hmm.
be a part of. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the way I look at it, is just it's just this like phenomenal, like natural phenomenon that God created that moves us. And and so it just makes sense that that's something that we do in church, because people do it everywhere. Like it's all over the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was talking to Isai exactly about what you just mentioned right now. You and your friend. I teach music here at Bridge, and so I've been teaching guitar lessons since I was 16, and I think I mean, it's just true. It's the more you get into music and you start to study it, more the science, the music theory. I mean, it's just crazy how you have in one key there's only 7 notes, and then a chord, minor and majors are made up of just 3 notes out of that 7, and there's just these laws that are within these, this metaphysical. You can't touch it. They're literally just sound waves, and they bring us joy, they bring us sadness, they bring about so much emotion, and it's just and it's just weird within that system. I mean, about the circle of fifths, music theory, and all that stuff, and it's just weird. Like if you go with outside of those seven notes, you all of a sudden have cacophony, and it sounds bad. Like why is that? Why you ask all these, you go on and on and on, and ask all these philosophical questions. But I completely agree. It's just music's trippy, man. It's very interesting.
Yep. It's wild. I was just going to interject a little bit.
Yeah, go.
Then we got a guy in my band who also teaches music and math, and he makes atonal music.
Okay.
And so he makes music that does exist outside of the circle of fifths for fun.
Right.
To like push the boundaries of stuff and go like, well, if you grew up in India, you wouldn't think this sounds sad, but check this out. Like it's not a Western scale.
Right.
And it just further, like, it's kind of like it just it just opens up a whole other universe of like, well, this makes me feel weird. And he's like, well, yeah, because you've been raised in 300 years of that feeling weird, but check it out, like this wouldn't feel weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
It just makes the mystery even deeper, kind of.
Yeah, like we really don't even know the boundaries or even if there is to music. Yeah, that's it. I mean, you look at, I mean, it's weird. Like you have like just these 7 notes, or like even if you're saying not even 7, you have the 12, and you just kind of use it like a paintbrush, like colors to make this picture, and we don't know, and maybe there's colors we haven't even seen. I don't even know what that means, but just, are there notes we haven't even heard, frequencies we haven't even heard? We're getting all trippy on this podcast.
I like it.
Yeah. So the latest album, Beauty Between, it definitely takes on a new sound than your prior albums, as we've talked about. But what made you what was the desire to go into the genre of hip hop, and also too, what's the meaning behind the title, Beauty Between?
Yeah. Well, really, it just came out of me producing for some hip hop artists for a while, and I was trying to make stuff. Andy and Minio, and I were working a lot together with our new drummer Daniel Steele, and working on music for him, which was really refreshing to me, because it took me right back to being 13 and 14, and it just felt super, super fun. But we had all these ideas that weren't going to work for Andy, and I didn't want to like necessarily leave them on the shelf. So I just bandified them. So like Alive and Safe Retreat and Playing with Fire, those might have been the only 3. Those are the only 3 initially that were kind of started for Andy, and they weren't going to work for him. So I had this, I've been in this hyper collaborative zone where I was meeting the guys from Reach Records and Humble Beast, and kind of coming in as the the indie music guy from Seattle, or the guy that could get weird sounds or sample weird things. And so it's just hyper collaborative. And we just had the idea of, we should do a mixtape with all this stuff. Like, we should actually release all this stuff. There'd always been a big hip hop influence in a lot of our rhythms and stuff like that. But, and so we'd always hear, you guys should have somebody rap on a song or something like that. And that always just felt really like, I don't know, that's like some Nashville for King and Country type, like, just really predictable this thing that we would do. So anyways, we were like, what if we just make an entire rap album? That would be out of nowhere. That would be really fun.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. So we went for it. Initially I was going to have a rapper on like every song. And I literally just started getting people's numbers and texting them. Like, I'd never met Derek Minor when I was hitting him up. I was just, we were hitting up everybody, Lecrae, like, who wants to be on this Kings Kaleidoscope mixtape? And so it was just very collaborative. And then same thing with kind of the whole art world created behind it. I just reached out to somebody from my friend now, Tobias. I loved what he was doing on Instagram. He had liked something, and I just found his Instagram and was blown away. And so we ended up collaborating, while I was making the mixtape, going back and forth, kind of creating this visual universe. And so even the title, The Beauty Between, kind of, it encapsulated the whole thing, where we were working with a bunch of different people that came from different places in the world, different cultural backgrounds, different races. They had different theologies, and there was a lot of beauty in the middle of all of our perspectives. And wherever that Venn diagram crossed over, there was this commonality that was really, really beautiful. And so that kind of, the whole project really was all about collaboration and kind of reaching outside of what was like, the zones we had been working in before. And it was really fun. So it did turn out much more like an album. Like, I think people think about it like a full-length album, but it's only 30 minutes. But I guess that could be an album now that Kanye did all those 7-song albums.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. When I first heard that the album was coming out, I didn't know it was going to be a hip hop album, so I started playing it, and I was like, "Whoa, this is completely different." I had, it took a little bit of adjusting for me. I will be honest, but eventually I ended up liking it a lot. So
yeah, we're stoked about it.
Yeah, no, it's great. You guys just make good music. Period. You guys are not afraid to go outside of the boundaries of you guys. Y'all push it. So Alive is by far one of my personal favorite songs off of the album. What was the inspiration behind it? I know verse 3 is by far, out of all the lyrics from the Kings Kaleidoscope songs, verse 3 of Alive is by far like my favorite. I just love that entire verse. But what was the inspiration behind it?
Honestly, most of our songs are music first. Cadences, melodies, and the lyrics get plugged in last based on the feeling. And I also don't know, like, I'll sing gibberish because it feels right onto a song, and I don't know what it's gonna mean until like right when the song's done or when I'm digging through lyrics to plug in. And that was one where the whole feeling was this. This is gonna be, we got to really be careful because this could be borderline cheesy, really fast. But this whole thing is like kind of like a fight song. It's like
feels like one.
It's like "Come at me, bro." Like, it's really kind of cocky, but in like a really solid, feet planted, confident way. Like you're just not afraid of anything.
Yeah.
And kind of just staring down evil and Satan and just kind of saying like, there's nothing, you have nothing, basically.
Right.
And so, Zach Bolin, who has a band called Citizens and Saints, they're we're really, really close buddies, and he does a ton of lyric writing with me. So I do all this music. I get everything ready. I start kicking around ideas, and then we just start these infinite iMessage threads of trying to piece together lyrics and concepts. And he comes over to my house. We spend hours just digging into them. And this was probably, Alive was probably the one where I had a gibberish cadence on the chorus that I loved the feel of. I'm talking like the way the consonants were. I don't remember what it was, but I was like, we have to make whatever lyrics we get, they have to sound like this and they have to sit like this. We can't change the way my mouth moves when I sing this. We have to find the words that feel this way because it's the right thing.
Yeah.
And we found lyrics after like a week that fit in the thing, that fit it perfectly.
Yeah.
And once we had that chorus, then we fleshed out those verses. So, yeah.
No, that's awesome. I was going to read some of the lyrics here, but it reads like for our listeners. It says, "Don't you get that I'm defended? I will never die. It's a battle that you can't win. This love, it keeps me alive. And I will never have to die your death. My final breath, the birth of life. I will rise up resurrected, my past and future in Christ." And then he goes on, "You will never feel my freedom, the embrace of light. Know the power of a new life where fear and faith collide." And they're just so inspirational lyrics, man, and I love it. I listen to the song definitely on days that I'm having that are bad. I know the first time I actually sat down and went through some of the lyrics, I thought of the Apostle Paul, and just his courage and being able to proclaim the gospel. And there was that. And this verse just fits that because he definitely was fearless. He was faithful. I mean, he was fearless and faithful, and he would go even to the point of death. Why? Because he knew that he was alive in it. He could sacrifice his life at the stake of the gospel, knowing that the gospel is going to continue. And he was the person who said, I saw my life as worthless. All things unto knowing Christ that was more of value, and it was all for the sake of the gospel. And I've always said, there's only one faith that could talk like that, and that's the Christian faith. To see your life like that.
Wild, man.
For the song "Sticks and Stones." What was the meaning and the purpose behind that one?
I mean, that's my song for Mark Driscoll.
Okay.
It's pretty. You can just read. I mean,
right.
And we can go look at those lyrics, and it spells it out pretty clearly.
Yeah.
That's my Mars Hill song of like, hey, I mean, really, like, you're gonna. I don't know. There's so many different things to say about that whole situation, but
right.
At the end of the day, like, God blew it up because the church, the leadership of that church could not handle the kind of the resurgence and the almost movement that God was doing and wanted to continue doing, I believe. And so he shut it down. He was like, this is not going to work. So. It's funny, on that record I didn't see, this is what I'm talking about. I didn't realize it till later. So I have that song, which is kind of about, another man's pride. And then I have another song on the records, Sometimes Phoenix, which is about my pride. And so now we started playing them, back to back at shows. And in one show I just realized, like, and I said it and I didn't really think about it till after. I was like, oh, this song is about another man's pride. This song is about my pride. And it's like, see, it's crazy. I'm putting both of them right next to each other on a record. And I never would have thought that, one was about me building my own kingdom and one was about somebody else trying to build their kingdom. Yeah. Kind of wild.
Right. Yeah. And you did mention that in the song, and was it the song Phoenix? I can't quote it verbatim. I'm probably going to butcher it, but you said, when will I stop measuring my weight in gold? Because when I'm an old man, I'll be in my castle cold.
Alone in my castle cold, yeah.
Yeah, and so what? I guess just going into that, I guess some of the struggles of your pride. Of it, well, like what is that lyric about? What is sometimes Phoenix? What's the whole meaning behind that song?
Well, let's see. I mean, once again, it's kind of, you can read the lyrics and get the picture of it. But I had a friend tell me when I was like 25, or through somebody else, they were like, oh man, Chad, he used to be like this wild phoenix, and now he's just like this kind of normal he's just cooled off. Now he's like too tame now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like super hard for me to hear, because they're basically saying, you know, well, Chad's as an artist now is just kind of like normal.
Right.
He's normal. And, you know, and so there's a lot there wrapped up in you know, I feel like a lot of my identity is always being challenged to come from what I produce and what I create.
Mm-hmm.
That's always like an internal struggle for me.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that whole song is basically just talking about this chasing after building something for yourself that ends up kind of leaving you all by yourself and alone.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really it. You know, I mean, it really is like about building your own kingdom for yourself out of greed or desperation, and then just being left all alone.
Okay.
And, you know, the image of a phoenix is kind of this like super rare, kind of like incredible, like, you know, thing that you can see, like, wow, look at that.
Yeah.
And so, and it was kind of like this, the feeling for me is that, like, I can do that. I can make people look at what I make and go like, oh my gosh, look at that. That's amazing. Blah, blah, blah. And then the next minute I'm like tapped out because of my anxiety, or because I just can't keep up that facade necessarily.
Okay. All right.
And so that's where the sometimes comes in. It's like really inconsistent. I say like inconsistent wonder. I'm afraid to let them down, you know, or stuff like that. So, yeah.
All right. Well, you mentioned anxiety, and so with that said, I definitely want to talk about the song "A Prayer," because that's when we talked, up in Austin. I remember I when I spoke to you, I have a lot of great appreciation for that song and the reason behind it. I mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast, but for our listeners, I really wanted for you to give like the reason and the meaning behind that song to bring clarity. And maybe this is something just as me and you who struggle with anxiety, could bring kind of clarity to the situation. Because, a lot of people, they'll be like, what, there's an explicit word on there? He throws out an F-bomb. Right. And, I personally don't know if I would have thrown the F-bomb in the song, or not. But I just want to kind of bring understanding, if possible, just to this struggle of anxiety. I mean, it goes deep, man. So if you could just, expound on that.
Yeah. So when I was 25 years old, I left. Well, maybe 24. Yeah, I don't know. 25 years old. My wife and I both left super unhealthy church environment that was really manipulative, where we left our community there. We left 2 jobs, so we ended up having 0 income. Then we had a stillborn child, our first son named Zion. I wrote him a song on the first record. Then we lost 2 other family members the same night that summer.
Wow.
Then, and also in the same 6 months, my wife's dad was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he lost his life 10 weeks after that.
Wow.
Really sudden.
Wow.
So that was and I was recording Becoming Who We Are during that time frame. I'd never made a record in my life. So, I was making it on my laptop. So that whole period was so heightened and intense. It really spun me out for about 2 or 3 years, where I just was, I literally, it's kind of like a nervous breakdown. It's hard to think of it that way in the time, but when I look back on it, it's like, that's basically what I was. I would get nervous in the car on the freeway if there was traffic. I couldn't look up at the sky because I felt like I was going to float into off of the earth into the universe. Couldn't get on. I mean, airplanes were like out of the question. Kings couldn't really travel on our first record and play shows. All this stuff, right? So that was just where I was for 2 years. And those 2 years are kind of this stacking up of the record Beyond Control, which is just, that record just kind of is the whole journey of me wading through that, waiting for God to help me, looking for him every day to help me get through each day, and all of that. So, and a prayer is kind of I don't know, it's definitely like the bold header for that whole season, where gosh, I mean, it's so weird how songs come around. So I had this demo with that melody that literally was going to be a pop song. We thought this is going to be the pop like jam on the record. Is like Four on the Floor. It had that melody, it had like these synths in it and all this stuff. And it lived there for like 7 months. And it was always the one as I was chipping away on the record of like, well, when we come back to that one, it'll be easy because it's so catchy. It's going to be easy. I'll just keep working on these other ones. I'll work on In This Ocean or most of it or whatever. And, you know, that one's going to be easy. And every time I'd go to try to do something with that song, I just couldn't get anywhere with it.
Wow.
And then eventually at some point, you know, we just did like 808s and it became like super, super haunting and, you know, completely different feel. And so that was when, you know, I sort of completely retooled what I was singing about. And actually, you know, gosh, it's so crazy. I even did have the "Will I fall or will I misstep" line, but I didn't know what it meant. It wasn't going to mean anything. And so, sorry.
No, that's all right.
My boy just came downstairs and like, I want to interview, buddy. So, so yeah, you guys see what I'm saying when I referenced this earlier. I even have a lyric, or I have something subconsciously in my head, and I don't even know what it means. That was kind of that lyric. But I ended up almost in one night just feeling super, super heavy, sitting in my basement that I was vacuuming this morning, and kind of sang both of those verses, and they just were what they were, and I just let them sit there. And I just knew there was something that was so powerful about me just kind of transcribing that emotion. And it just sat there for like 3 days, and I played it for a few people, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is really, really powerful. What's the ending going to be? Because I had the music for the ending, but I was like, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what I'm going to say. And I couldn't touch it. I couldn't listen to the song without like weeping because it was just so honest to me.
Yeah.
And then I finally, I waited 3 days, and then I finally went downstairs, like when nobody else was home, and was just sitting there trying to work on the song, singing stuff and praying. And the lyrics to the ending just like boom, 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 boom. They just hit me super hard. They're like, you know, flooded me typing through some ideas. And I sang it once or twice, and that was it. And I couldn't, I mean, you can hear me, I'm like crying in the end of the song because I'm feeling like I'm just hearing this truth from God. So, and just feeling it, and that was it. And then we had this huge, you know, and once again, I couldn't listen to it when we mixed the song because it was too emotional for me.
Wow.
You know, it was just like, it was so intense the first couple of times we played on the road. Like, I think it took me about a year to get used to just playing it.
Wow.
But then we had this dilemma of like, well, we're going to clean it up or we're not going to clean it up. And it was just really, you know, I mean, we talked about it so many times with so many different people and, you know, all the people in our circles. And it just felt like at the end of the day, the only reason to change it was going to be for a market, like an American evangelical market,
right?
To make money. And it was like, look, you don't change a testimony you just like somebody comes to my house and they're telling me what they're going through and they're sitting on my couch, and I'm not making them change their language. And I'm also not like, there was no, but at the same time, I know there's people that have totally different theology and religion than I do. And, you know, this song feeds people's souls. So I made a clean one for them. And the backlash was less than we anticipated, which was great. You know, I mean, Christian bookstores pulled all of our albums from their bookshelves and things like that, but it kind of was just like, well, whatever, now we don't have to deal with you guys anymore. weird subculture. So it's great. It's been great since then. It's like it just has solidified we're not going to play by these dumb rules that like we really don't believe in, and we're going to just keep making really honest gospel music and not be afraid of anything or afraid to not be able to like, you know, play in the same lanes as kind of some other Christian artists. And the song is like, you know, been super, super, super helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the, I mean, I didn't even need validation, but that's sort of the, I would say, fruit of that song.
Right.
You have people who already were going to be critical of everything. They just stayed critical. And actually now they just moved on because they're kind of like, well, okay, just jump off the gamut. We're not going to mess with them, which for us, we're kind of like, great, we don't have to deal with you. And then the people that it was going to mean something to, now it, you know, it really did mean something to them. So,
right.
And we still get messages. I mean, I should like look up. We got one like the other day. I should find it while we're on the phone here. But we just still get messages all the time about how important that song has been for people.
Yeah. Well, the first time I was in Isai's car and you played it for me, and Isai's sitting across from me, and and I was just like, wow, this song is extremely powerful. And I think I went home. I went to go look at like what the whole meaning behind the song was. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like I've struggled with anxiety tremendously, and I mean the fear is heavy, man. Like it runs deep, and I think until like people really know what true, like I guess clinical anxiety, if you would call it, feels like, it's terrifying. I mean, you're crippled. Like there's nothing that you can really do mentally. And that was another thing that I did notice in the second half of the song is that it did sound like you were weeping, on many of the parts. And this is another question I want to ask, because I had read an article online that it said that, you know, something behind this song was that in your anxiety, you were scared that Jesus wasn't going to be next to you when you died, that you had like maybe some sort of unassurance of faith or a struggle there. I don't know if you could just clarify that up.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't remember saying that, but I think that's definitely something that I'm afraid of a lot, because I mean, faith is faith. Faith is jumping off of a cliff. That's the way it feels to me. And so I can know something and not in my mind and not feel it at all in my spirit. Especially like in you know, with like mental health stuff. It's like, I can believe that God loves me, and I can also feel every part of my body that I'm going to die. And I'm not safe. And faith is saying like, I guess I'm still going to say that you're good, God, but you sure aren't helping me out right now. I feel like everything's falling apart. That doesn't make him less good, but it is what it is. So I've had that a lot, you know, but it doesn't make me necessarily stop submitting to that faith. It just is the reality of a broken mind and a fight or flight body, basically. Right.
No, exactly.
And also I think another something I want to bring up and maybe turn to maybe listeners who might have listened to that song and maybe put up a wall between your music and themselves. Like maybe is there something else you would want to say to those people or encourage them with? Or
man, honestly, I would just say that I mean, I don't understand it, honestly. That's what I would say. I would have a lot of questions. I just don't get it. Like, I genuinely don't understand. And we probably have a very different philosophy on life. But I just found this message that from the other day that's literally somebody, you know, I won't say their name or anything, but this person just reached out to us and said, you know, I just want to thank you for your passion, your Christ-centered songs. I heard your song of prayer, and at first was unsure how I felt about it. And then they go on to say that they had asked somebody else about it, and the person was saying, well, it's, you know, from this time in his life, it's about, you know, when they lost his child. This person, they came home to their 4-month-old who had suffocated and died at their house in their blankets. And they couldn't save their baby. And the prayer was this song that like helped them through the time, and they used it. Let's see here. Yeah, they made a video with pictures of her and family with a prayer playing, and their 4 other kids called it Betty's song, which was their little girl.
Wow.
And so you look at that, and it's like, are you just being like a Pharisee and whining about something that you don't want to even try to understand, or some like, I just don't understand it. Like, do you get that? Like, when we go to Norway, they're like, nobody cares here. You're singing the gospel. Or do you get that when we go to like New Zealand, the director of the festival is like, that song's the reason you're here. You know, it's just a short. Like, you have a Western American evangelical view of language that's so tiny. It's so small, and the heart behind something is so powerful and so gospel saturated. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's frustrating, I guess, in a sense of like, you see like what this is actually doing for people and what it did for me. Like, we're not doing this for any reason outside of like, it literally is real.
Right.
You know, like,
yeah.
It's just real. That's why you do stuff as an artist. And it's like a real encounter with God through his Holy Spirit. Like, it's a very real encounter. So I just don't even have time to argue about it.
Yeah.
Of course. Like, if you can't see that, I don't know. Like, what do you believe in? I don't really get it. You know, like, I don't really understand. We might not. Well, I don't get it at that point. You know.
Yeah. No, that's clear. Yeah. Also, I think another song that we wanted to bring up, and I think is also very similar to a prayer in some ways, is Felix Copa. I know that's one of my favorite songs, maybe one of Julio's favorite songs as well. And it also maybe has the same dynamic where it has these verses that are talking very intense, personal lyrics, just of our failure, of our fall, and then moves on to these bridges or these second melodies that are just talking about grace and how personal Jesus wants to be. Can you recall some of the inspiration behind that song? And I mean, maybe specifically also that bridge, just because I know we've been, how Julio mentioned, we've been to your concert twice, and when those hi-hats start coming up and those guitars start hitting, I know the people just start going crazy for those lyrics too, because they're pretty intense.
So my friend Alex really was one of the guys who would be the like pastor, theologian in my band. We worked together, and he came to my office one day and just was telling me about this concept of Felix Copa that he'd been, reading about, and kind of blew his mind. And we both were like, this is a song, but we didn't know how to make it a song. And we just knew that concept of being able to look at sin and rejoice because it shows God's grace. That's like that's a very difficult thing to communicate, but it's a really powerful way to understand the gospel. And so at that time we were at Mars Hill, and Brian Eichelberger, the sing team, and Cam, who has a band called Ghost Ship, we're all part of the same kind of thing there. They were the primary lyric writers on that song. I was like giving the direction. I was kind of saying, hey, this is this concept, this is gonna be really cool. But they did. I've been trying to think, like, I probably only wrote like 25% of the lyrics from that song, or 30% of the lyrics. Cam went home after we'd been sitting in the studio talking about the idea, and he had a nightmare and woke up and wrote the bridge to Felix Copa.
Wow.
But he had this vision, like, nightmare where he was this guy like on top of this throne of bodies, and it was like this crazy thing. And he woke up and wrote the bridge and brought it back in, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is perfect. And so, and so in that sense, I very much was just kind of on the side directing the vibe and saying, like, this is what we got to say. But those guys did all the heavy lifting of chorus maybe. But Brian wrote a lot of the first and second verse, and Cam wrote that bridge, and so I mean, yeah, it was like a team effort on that one.
Right. So what's coming up for Kings Kaleidoscope?
Like I said, we're making a new record right now. We've got a lot of stuff, and I'm in this like sifting period of really kind of waiting for what's going to settle and what it is that I do want to say. So far, a lot of the stuff is about apathy, and that's going to be some kind of a theme on this record, but I'm not sure how. But I'm just...
All right.
Yeah, there's going to be something in there for sure. And but I mean, it's as fresh as Kings has always been. It's new and it's exciting, and like I can't wait for people to hear it.
Yeah.
And we might test some of these songs on a tour. We're going to announce it soon. We have like a Midwest tour, and we might test a few songs this fall.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, well, we appreciate you for coming on to the program. We're already hitting the top of the hour here. So, but again, man, we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on, Chad.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And hey, whenever you have the next album come out, man, we'll have you back on. We'd love to have you back on to come talk about it.
All right, let's do it. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, like, subscribe, and grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And we will see you back on the next one later.